The morning sun filtered through the eucalyptus trees that lined Rosewood Drive, casting dappled shadows across Marcus Chen's modest front yard. He sat on his porch with a cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood wake up. It was early October, and the air had that perfect California autumn quality, cool enough to notice, warm enough to ignore. Marcus had lived in the Willow Grove subdivision for 7 years, and he'd never considered himself a particularly confrontational person. That was about to change. The Tesla had been parked in his driveway for 3 weeks now. Not the house itself. Marcus lived in a townhouse with a small garage that was, to his eternal frustration, too narrow for a modern electric vehicle. The driveway had a level 2 charger installed beside his front stoop, something he'd paid $1,800 to have professionally installed last month. It was his. The charger, the driveway, the electrical hookup running to his meter, all of it. He'd never thought he'd need to worry about it. Marcus worked in cybersecurity, spent most of his days staring at screens, and had trained himself to expect problems in the digital realm. Real-world drama had never really touched him. His ex had moved to Portland 3 years ago, taking their shared dog with her. He had no kids. His parents lived 6 hours away. The most conflict in his life usually centered around whether the Thai place or the sushi place was better for lunch. Then Karen moved in 2 doors down. He didn't know her last name for the first week. He only knew that she drove a white Range Rover, had 4 children who seemed to exist in a perpetual state of barely suppressed chaos, and had the kind of voice that carried, the kind that didn't so much speak as broadcast. He'd heard her yelling at a contractor about a fence. He'd heard her on FaceTime with someone's school about unacceptable standards. He'd heard her on her porch phone, saying things like, "I absolutely will not." And well, I happen to think, in the tone of someone who believed the universe had personally conspired to wrong her. The first indication of a problem came on a Tuesday afternoon. Marcus was working from home, headphones on, deep in a code review when he noticed his porch camera notification ping. He almost didn't look at it, just another delivery driver, probably, but something made him glance at his phone. The woman on his porch was wearing yellow Lululemon and a scowl. She was plugging something into his charger. Marcus yanked off his headphones and went to the window. She was definitely charging her phone. A white iPhone held against the charger port like she was performing essential surgery. She seemed absolutely oblivious to the concept that this required permission. When she left 5 minutes later, Marcus felt a strange flutter in his chest. Not quite anger. Confusion, maybe. Violation. He wasn't sure how to categorize the feeling of watching a stranger use his property without asking. The next day she was back. This time she had a child with her. A boy, maybe 8, dragging an iPad attached to a charging cable. "Come on, Ethan," the woman said in that broadcast voice. "Just need to juice this up for 5 minutes. My charger at home is broken." Marcus watched from his doorway. The woman, he assumed this was Karen, though he still didn't know for certain, was utterly unconscious of her transgression. She held the iPad's charging cable as if it were obvious that his charger was communal property, as if the electricity in Rosewood Drive simply existed in some kind of neighborhood commons. On the third occurrence, Marcus opened his door. "Hey," he called out, "can I help you with something?" The woman, it was definitely Karen. He'd finally heard her name when she was yelling at someone on the phone, turned slowly, as if he'd interrupted her mid-thought, and she was having difficulty recalibrating to his existence. She was probably 45, with sharp cheekbones and the kind of blonde hair that required serious maintenance. She wore expensive activewear that looked incongruous on someone holding a charging cable like a sword. "Oh, hello," she said, in a tone that suggested she was doing him a favor by acknowledging his presence. "I'm just quickly charging my phone. Mine died." "I can see that," Marcus said carefully, "but that's my charger on my property." "Yes," she said, as if this was obvious. "That's why it's so convenient." There was a pause. Marcus found himself waiting for her to continue, as if there must be a joke coming. There wasn't. "I'd prefer if you didn't use my charger without asking," he said, trying to keep his voice level. Karen gave him a look that suggested he'd just explained that the earth was flat. "It's just a charger. The electricity is already running there." "The electricity is connected to my meter and my property, so I'd appreciate it if you asked first." He'd meant to be polite. He'd genuinely attempted civility. But the words came out more firmly than intended, and he watched Karen's expression shift. Not to understanding, not to shame, to something else entirely. to the look of a person who had been told no and was deciding that this was an outrageous injustice. "Well," she said, carefully detaching her phone from the charger, "I didn't realize you were so territorial about a public charger." "It's not a public charger, it's visible from the street," Karen interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "Which makes it community property. I think that's quite reasonable." "That's not how property works," Marcus said. "That's not very neighborly," Karen replied, and she said it in a way that suggested she'd won the argument through some form of rhetorical judo he hadn't seen coming. She left, but not before making a point of looking at him, as if he'd proven himself to be some kind of unreasonable curmudgeon who probably kicked puppies in his spare time. Marcus went back inside. His heart was pounding. He felt oddly unsettled, as if he'd just had an argument with reality itself. That evening, he texted his friend Daniel. "Is it weird that someone used my EV charger without permission?" Daniel called immediately. "Did you tell her to stop?" "Yeah, she said it was public property." "What? It's in your driveway." "That's what I said." "What did she say?" Marcus paused, trying to recall. "That it's visible from the street, so it's community property." Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then, "Is she insane?" "I don't know," Marcus said, "but I think she might be." That night, Marcus installed a padlock on the charger. It was a simple brass padlock, the kind you'd get at any hardware store, $14. He threaded the cable through a loop he bolted to the post beside the charger so that the charging port itself wasn't accessible without the key. It took him 40 minutes. He was not angry during this process. He was, in fact, operating from a place of pure pragmatism. He'd learned that reasoning with Karen was impossible, so he would simply remove the option. The lock impressed him with its finality. It looked almost formal, like he was securing state secrets rather than a charging cable. But there was something satisfying about it, too, a physical boundary made manifest. He took a photo and texted it to Daniel with the caption, "Problem solved." Daniel sent back 3 laughing emojis and a thumbs up. For 3 days, nothing happened. Marcus returned to his life, to his work, to his carefully managed existence. He'd occasionally glance out his window at the lock and feel a small sense of satisfaction. It was clean. It was simple. It was legal. He had every right to do this. On the 4th day, Karen appeared on his porch. Marcus was on a Zoom meeting when she knocked. He saw her face in his porch camera before he actually heard her. She looked furious. He let the meeting go to voice only. "Sorry, 1 second, someone's at the door," and opened the door. "What is this?" Karen demanded, gesturing at the lock. "What is this lock?" "A lock," Marcus said, "for the charger." "You can't just lock up a public utility." "It's not a public utility. It's my charger, on my property. I can lock it however I want." Karen stepped back as if his words had physically repelled her. "You know what? I'm going to call the HOA about this. The homeowners association has rules about." "About what?" "About me securing my own property." "About reasonable access to community resources," Karen said, and Marcus watched her eyes narrow as she realized she'd found an angle. "You can't just deprive neighbors of basic utilities." "You're not deprived of utilities. You have your own charger at home." "That's broken," she snapped. "Then call an electrician. Call the manufacturer. Call Tesla. I don't know, but you're not using mine." Karen's face flushed a mottled red. She looked for a moment like she might actually physically attack him. Instead, she turned and walked away, pulling her phone out of her pocket. Marcus went back to his meeting. The HOA president was a man named Robert Chen, no relation, who Marcus had met exactly once, at a subdivision gathering 2 years ago. Robert seemed like a reasonable person, the kind of man who wore khakis and was comfortable saying things like, "It depends on the specific wording of the bylaws." He showed up at Marcus's door on Saturday morning, looking apologetic. "I got a complaint about the charger lock," Robert said. "Karen Mitchell, she's the one down on Pepper Lane. She's claiming you're preventing access to shared resources." "It's not a shared resource," Marcus said. "It's my personal level 2 charger. It's in my driveway. I paid $1,800 to install it." Robert nodded slowly, as if processing information that didn't quite fit his mental framework. She seemed to think it was kind of a community thing. "Why would she think that?" "Honestly, I have no idea," Robert admitted. But she's insisting that EV chargers are part of the neighborhood infrastructure and that preventing access to them is against the collective spirit of the development. The collective spirit of the development? Marcus repeated flatly. Her words, not mine, Robert said quickly. But look, do you want me to handle this? Because I'll look at the bylaws. If it's your personal charger on your property, you have every right to secure it. She doesn't have a leg to stand on. I'd appreciate that, Marcus said. Robert left, and Marcus felt a strange deflation. He'd won the argument in theory, but the fact that he'd needed to have it at all felt like a loss. That night, his brother called. I heard there's drama, his brother David said. Marcus had apparently texted his parents about the situation, who had texted David, who had apparently been waiting for an opportunity to insert himself into local drama. It's not drama, Marcus said. It's just a woman who thinks she can use my property without permission. Yeah, that's drama, David said. What are you doing about it? I locked the charger. The HOA president said I'm in the right. Okay, good. Just don't let this escalate. Why would it escalate? Marcus asked. Because people are crazy, David said simply. Especially when they feel like they've been wronged, even if they're the ones who are clearly in the wrong. You set a boundary and she's going to test it. That's what people do. Marcus didn't think David was right about this. Karen was annoying, sure. She was entitled and unreasonable. But she was also just a neighbor who'd made a stupid assumption and gotten called on it. She'd move on. People always did. He would come to think of this as his first major error in judgment. For 2 weeks, Marcus saw no sign of Karen. The lock remained on the charger. His Tesla sat peacefully in the driveway, accumulating a fine layer of dust. He returned to his life, to his work, to the comfortable rhythm of solitude with the occasional video call to friends. Then he came home one evening to find his porch camera had been activated 17 times. 17. He scrolled through the timestamps. They were all within a 3-hour window that afternoon. Most of them just showed Karen standing in front of the locked charger, staring at it as if it were an art installation she was trying to understand. In one of the videos, she was on her phone, gesturing at the lock. No, I'm telling you, he's being completely unreasonable, he heard her say. It's a public charger. He can't just lock people out of, yes, I know it's his property, but... The video cut off as she turned away. That night, Marcus received a text from a number he didn't have saved. This is Karen. I need to talk to you about the charger situation. He didn't respond. She called the next morning. He sent it to voicemail. She left a message. Hi, Marcus, this is Karen from down the street. I really think we need to discuss this charger situation like adults. It's creating a lot of tension in the neighborhood, and I think we could find a solution that works for everyone. Can you call me back? He didn't. By Wednesday, he'd received 3 more calls and a formal email from the HOA, forwarded to him by Robert with an apologetic note attached. She's claiming disability discrimination because she says her broken charger is essential for her medical equipment, and that preventing her access to a working charger violates her rights. I told her this was ridiculous, but wanted to give you a heads up. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. The situation was no longer abstract. It was becoming documented, formal, like it was taking on a life of its own, growing exponentially beyond his control. He texted Robert, what does she actually want? Robert, I think she wants you to let her use the charger again, but also she might want to make a point. Not sure. Marcus sat in his home office, staring at his laptop, trying to work but unable to focus. He kept imagining scenarios. Karen calling the city. Karen posting on neighborhood Facebook groups. Karen telling everyone that Marcus was a selfish man who was preventing a struggling mother from accessing community resources. That was when he decided on the padlock with the key. Not a combination lock, a keyed lock that he controlled entirely. He could change the key. He could prevent access, and more importantly, he could decide if he wanted to let someone have a key. He could make it clear that this was his choice. The lock came on Friday. It was a more substantial lock in sleek black metal, and it made the whole setup look less like a practical security measure and more like a deliberate exclusion, which it was. On Saturday morning, there was a note taped to his garage door. Marcus, I'm trying very hard to be reasonable about this, but you're not making it easy. I have children who depend on my ability to charge my vehicle. My charger is genuinely broken, and I'm waiting for a repair person who's completely booked out. All I'm asking for is temporary access while I'm waiting. You're my neighbor, we could be friends, but instead you're choosing to be difficult. I'd like to think you're better than that. Karen. Marcus read the note 3 times. Each time he felt something different. The first time he felt guilty. The second time he felt angry at feeling guilty. The third time he felt absolutely certain that this was a manipulation and that responding to it would only make things worse. He didn't write back. He threw the note away. That evening she called again. He let it go to voicemail. She left another message, her voice taking on a slightly different quality, less reasonable, more wounded. Marcus, I really don't understand why you're being like this. I'm not trying to cause problems. I just needed help and you've decided to be cruel about it. She'd used the word cruel. He'd locked up his own property. David called him that night unprompted. How's the Karen situation? She called it cruel that I won't let her use my charger. Oh no, David said. No, that's bad. That's the moment where she's shifted the narrative from unreasonable neighbor to victimized neighbor. You're not the guy protecting his property anymore. You're the guy being cruel. But I'm not being cruel. I know that. But she's told that story to herself so many times that she believes it. And she's probably telling it to everyone else too. What she wants now isn't just charger access. She wants you to admit you're wrong. She wants to win. Marcus felt cold. What am I supposed to do? Honestly, nothing you do at this point is going to satisfy her. You set a boundary, which was the right call. But now you're dealing with someone who's shifted from making a request to demanding validation. You're not going to change her mind. After they hung up, Marcus sat in his kitchen for a long time, eating cereal directly from the box and staring at nothing. The next 2 weeks were quiet in the way that silence sometimes isn't. It was the quiet of someone gathering evidence, assembling arguments, preparing for something. Marcus stopped opening the door for deliveries. He became hyper-aware of his porch camera, checking it every hour, sometimes more frequently. He started taking screenshots of all of Karen's calls to his number, saving them in a folder titled, "Just in Case." He realized, entering into an adversarial mindset, not because he wanted to, but because the situation had evolved beyond his control. The first concrete indication that this had gone further came when he noticed activity on the neighborhood Facebook group. He didn't follow it closely. He was on the group mainly out of a sense of obligation to see emergency alerts and community announcements. But a notification on Thursday evening caught his attention. New post in Willow Grove community. The post was titled, "Charger Accessibility, a Community Concern." It was written by Karen, though she'd crafted it with enough rhetorical care that she sounded almost reasonable. She talked about the importance of electric vehicles to environmental sustainability. She discussed her own situation with delicacy, mentioning her broken charger without providing details about how it became broken or why she couldn't charge at home. Presumably, he thought, because the charger wasn't actually broken and she just liked using his. She talked about the importance of neighborhood solidarity and sharing resources in an environmentally conscious way. Then came the carefully worded dig. When a neighbor chooses to actively prevent others from accessing a resource that could help the community, it creates division at a time when we should be united. 3 people had already commented with thumbs-up emojis. One had written, "There's a lot of negativity in communities these days. We should all try to be more generous." Marcus stared at the post, feeling something that was half humiliation and half fury. She'd framed this as a community issue. She'd made it moral. And she'd done it without technically saying anything false. She'd just implied a lot of very misleading things. He forced himself to stop reading the comments. He knew what he'd find down there, a mix of people who'd agree with Karen because they hadn't heard his side, and a few people who'd argue with her, which would just make the whole thing bigger. Engagement, algorithm, amplification. He texted Robert, "Did you see the Facebook post?" Robert, "Oof, yeah, want me to say something?" "No, let it die." But it didn't die. By Saturday, the post had 43 comments. By Monday, 112. People were debating EV ethics, neighborhood generosity, and what they called digital age isolation. Someone mentioned something called community charging initiatives in Austin. Someone else talked about how selfish rich people were. Someone 3 comments down said that actually, it was important to respect private property. Marcus didn't read past the second day of comments. Instead, he did something he normally wouldn't do. He called his company's legal hotline, a benefit he'd apparently always had but never thought to use, and asked about his rights. The lawyer was a woman named Patricia who spoke in the efficient tones of someone who'd heard this exact question before. "You can absolutely secure your own property," she said. "A lock on your own charger isn't a liability issue. It's not preventing access to a public utility, it's protecting private property. If she's never suffered damages from the lock, broken fingers, vehicle damage, whatever, there's no basis for a lawsuit." "What if she calls the police?" "About what? Using your own lock on your own property? They won't care. Police have real crimes to deal with. Unless she can claim harassment, theft, or some form of discrimination, you're fine legally." Marcus felt some of the tension release from his shoulders. "What about discrimination? She mentioned something about disability. Does she actually have a documented disability that requires use of your charger?" "I don't think so. She just said her charger was broken." "Then she doesn't have a case. Discrimination law is specific. You can't just claim disability whenever something inconveniences you and expect accommodations on someone else's property." He felt better after the call, though not entirely. The legal foundation was solid. His rights were clear. But he also understood, in a way he hadn't before, that rights and reality didn't always align. Karen didn't care what the law said. She cared about the narrative she'd created. That evening, he got a call from someone he didn't know. "Hi, is this Marcus?" A woman's voice, warm and friendly. "Yes." "Oh, great. My name is Diana Torres. I live on Oak Lane. I'm kind of the informal community organizer around here. I heard about the charger situation, and I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk about a compromise." Marcus felt his internal alarm bells go off. "What kind of compromise?" "Well, I thought maybe we could work out a situation where Karen has access to the charger for, say, 1 hour on specific days while she's waiting for her charger to be repaired. That way, everyone's happy." "I don't want Karen to have access to my charger," Marcus said quietly. "Oh, I understand, but she has children and I think she's really been struggling with." "I'm sure she is, but that's not my responsibility." There was a pause. When Diana spoke again, her voice had taken on a different quality, still warm, but with an edge of judgment underneath. "I think it's important for our community to support each other, Marcus, especially when the situation is relatively easy to fix." "The situation is easy to fix," Marcus said. "She can call an electrician to fix her charger. That's the solution." "She says the electrician is booked for another month." "Then she waits a month." Another pause, longer this time. When Diana spoke again, she sounded almost disappointed, like he'd failed some kind of character test. "Well, I tried. I hope you'll reconsider." She hung up, and Marcus sat in the darkness of his apartment, feeling like he'd just made an enemy. He texted David. "Someone from the neighborhood called me asking me to compromise with Karen." David called immediately. "What did you say?" "No." "Good, that was the right call. If you give an inch, she takes a mile. You've already set the boundary, don't move it now." "But now I'm the bad guy." "You were always going to be the bad guy in her story," David said. "That's the thing about people like this. They need you to be the problem. It makes them the victim. The only way to not be the bad guy is to do what she wants, and then you're just not a person anymore. You're just an enabler." Marcus knew his brother was right. He understood intellectually that this was a game he couldn't win, but understanding didn't make it hurt less. On Tuesday, his company sent out a memo about work-from-home flexibility. Starting next month, people could work remotely up to 2 days a week, or come into the office full-time if they preferred. Marcus had been full-time remote for 3 years, and he'd never questioned it. But that afternoon, he called his manager and asked about coming into the office more often. "Sure," his manager said. "Any particular reason?" Marcus considered lying. Then he decided there was no point. "Personal reason, I'd prefer to be out of the house more." "No problem, start whenever you want. We've got plenty of desk space." So Marcus began going into the office, a 40-minute drive through increasingly terrible traffic. He told himself it was to get away from the situation with Karen. Truthfully, it was also to have less time at home, where every view out his window felt loaded with tension. On his first day commuting, he noticed 3 new cars parked on his street that he didn't recognize. He wondered if Karen had invited friends over to see the mean neighbor's house. He wondered if they were currently having tea on her porch and discussing his cruelty. Then he stopped wondering and focused on work. But the situation wasn't done with him. He got an email on Thursday morning from someone identifying as a city building inspector named David Valdez. The email was formal and official-looking. Dear Mr. Chen, this office has received a complaint regarding electrical installations at 447 Rosewood Drive. Specifically, a complaint has been filed about an EV charger installation that may not meet current electrical safety codes. We will need to inspect this installation to verify compliance. Please reply with available times for inspection within the next 2 weeks. Marcus read the email 3 times, each time feeling a different emotion: anger, panic, disbelief. He called the building department directly. Hi, I got an inspection notice about my EV charger, he said. Can you tell me more about the complaint? One moment, the woman on the other end said. There was typing. Okay, so we have a complaint filed by a Karen Mitchell regarding electrical safety concerns with your level 2 charger installation. She's claiming that the charger was installed without proper permits and may pose a fire hazard. The charger was professionally installed by a certified electrician. I have all the documentation, and I'm pretty sure the person who filed the complaint is my neighbor who's angry that I won't let her use it. I see, the woman said, and Marcus could hear the change in her tone. This was no longer an official matter, they were just 2 people talking. Yeah, that happens sometimes, but we still have to follow up on complaints. It won't be a big deal. Your electrician can provide documentation and will probably be done with it in 10 minutes. Will this investigation be public? The complaint is public record, yes. The inspection results will be documented as well. Marcus thanked her and hung up. He was shaking slightly. Karen had filed a formal complaint. She'd involved the city. She'd escalated this beyond neighborhood drama into official territory. It was, he had to admit, a brilliant move. Whether or not the complaint had any merit, it created a record. It made it official. It made him look like someone who'd done something that required investigation. He called Patricia, the lawyer, again. This is retaliation, Patricia said calmly. Filing a false complaint is actually illegal, but it's hard to prove malice. What you should do is document everything she's done. The calls, the Facebook post, the HOA complaint, everything. If this keeps escalating, you might have a case for harassment or tortious interference. What does that mean? Tortious interference is when someone intentionally interferes with your life or property to cause you harm. If she's filing false complaints just to harass you, that might qualify. But honestly, at this point, I'd just let the inspection happen, provide your documentation, and move on. Move on how? What if she keeps escalating? Patricia paused. Then you might need to escalate in another direction. Cease and desist letter. Restraining order if she starts showing up on your property. You have options, but I'd try to avoid them if possible. Once you get the legal system formally involved, it's hard to pull back. Marcus thanked her and returned to work, but he couldn't focus. Instead, he spent the afternoon documenting everything. He downloaded all his porch camera footage. He took screenshots of the Facebook post and the comments. He printed out copies of the official inspection request. He saved copies of all her calls to his voicemail. He was building a case against someone he'd never wanted to be in conflict with. That evening, the inspection notice appeared in the neighborhood Facebook group, posted by someone else. Anyone else getting inspections? Our building inspector is apparently very busy this month. In the comments, someone who Marcus assumed was Karen's friend wrote, probably because some people don't care about community safety. Installing electrical equipment without proper safety standards is actually dangerous to everyone. Marcus closed the app and didn't open it again. The inspection was scheduled for the following Thursday. Marcus took the afternoon off work and prepared meticulously. He had his electrician's license number, the original contract, photos of the installation process, the permit documentation, everything. When Inspector Valdez arrived, a tired-looking man in his 50s with a toolbox and a clipboard, Marcus handed him a folder with all of it already organized. This is thorough, Valdez said, flipping through. He examined the charger itself, took some measurements, tested a few connections, and nodded. This is fine, better than fine actually, proper installation, all in code. So there's no issue. None that I can see. Your electrician did solid work. He made some notes on his clipboard. I'll file my report, should be closed out by tomorrow. What happens to the complaint? It gets marked as unfounded, but the person who filed it will probably get a letter saying so. Sometimes that discourages further complaints, sometimes it doesn't. Marcus wondered which category Karen fell into. He filed for a cease and desist letter the following week. Patricia helped him draft it, a formal document that essentially told Karen to stop contacting him, stop making complaints about him, and stop discussing him on community platforms. It was legal. It was his right. It was also, he realized as he read through it, somewhat nuclear. Is this too much? He asked Patricia over the phone. Depends on your goals. If you want to de-escalate, don't send it. If you want to make it clear that you're serious and willing to take legal action, send it. It might back her off. It might also provoke her. No way to know. Marcus held the letter for 2 days. He reread it. He thought about not sending it. But he also thought about Karen making more complaints, posting more things, dragging more neighbors into her narrative. He thought about how she'd framed this as a moral issue, a community issue, his fault. He sent it on Friday, via certified mail. For 5 days, nothing happened. Then, on Wednesday evening, Marcus came home from work to find a police car parked in front of his house. His heart rate spiked immediately. He'd broken no laws. But the presence of the police created an instinctive anxiety, the way it did for most people who knew they were innocent, but also knew that innocence wasn't always protection. Officer Martinez was standing on his porch, looking tired. She was a woman in her 60s, with the demeanor of someone who'd been doing this job long enough to know that most situations were stupid. Marcus Chen, she asked. Yes. I'm here to take a statement regarding a complaint filed by Karen Mitchell. She's claiming that a cease and desist letter constitutes harassment and that a locked charger on your property is preventing her access to essential services. Marcus felt something crystallize in his chest. She'd called the police. She turned his attempt to establish boundaries into something that required police involvement. Can we go inside? He asked. Yeah, let's do that. Officer Martinez sat at his kitchen table and typed notes into a tablet as Marcus explained the situation. He walked her through the timeline. The initial charger use, his request that she stop, the lock, the Facebook post, the HOA complaint, the building inspector complaint, the attempted community mediation with Diana Torres. And the cease and desist letter, she asked. I sent that after she filed a complaint about the electrical installation being unsafe, which was false. Right, Martinez said. She didn't look surprised. So here's the thing. The cease and desist letter isn't harassment. You have every right to tell someone not to contact you. The charger situation is civil, not criminal. There's no crime here. But she's claiming that you're preventing her from charging her vehicle, which she says is essential for her to get to work. She can charge at her home or anywhere else. There are public charging stations. I know, and I'm telling you legally you're fine. I'm also going to tell her the same thing. But I wanted to get your side of things, and now I'm going to get hers, and this will be documented as a civil dispute that doesn't rise to the level of criminal harassment. You can still take her to small claims court if she damages your property or if you want to pursue some kind of restitution. But me, I'm not arresting anyone. After she left, Marcus sat in his kitchen for a long time. He'd won. He was on the right side of the law. The police had confirmed it. So why did it feel like Karen had gotten exactly what she wanted? The next morning, there was another post on the neighborhood Facebook group. Marcus saw it because his neighbor Terry, who lived on the other side from Karen, had texted him a screenshot with the message, "Don't let this get to you." The post was titled, "Police Visit My Story." It was long. Karen had written it with the care of someone who'd spent hours crafting the narrative, refining each sentence for maximum emotional impact. She talked about her children, about how hard she'd been working to transition to an electric vehicle for environmental reasons, about how she'd simply asked a neighbor for temporary assistance during a difficult time, and how that neighbor had responded with cruelty, legal threats, and intimidation. She wrote, "Last night, the police came to my house, not because I did anything wrong, but because my neighbor sent me a cease and desist letter after I tried to hold him accountable for safety concerns about his electrical installation." It was a twisting of the facts so complete that Marcus had to read it twice to understand what she'd actually said and what she'd implied. She'd filed the complaint first, then received the cease and desist. but the way she'd written it made it sound like she'd filed the complaint in self-defense. She continued, "This is not about a charger anymore. This is about how one person's refusal to be a good neighbor has escalated into legal action and police involvement. This is about a community that should support each other instead of tearing each other down." And then the final sentence, "I want to move forward, but I'm not sure how to do that when someone has shown they're willing to use the full force of the legal system against me simply for asking for help." It was insidious. It positioned her as the victim. It made his cease and desist letter sound like an act of aggression, and it suggested, without saying, that he'd been the one to escalate to the police when in fact she'd been the one to call them. The comments started almost immediately, dozens of them. People Marcus had never met were suddenly experts on his situation, and the vast majority had concluded that he was the villain. This is exactly what's wrong with this generation. No community spirit. I hope you're proud of yourself, Marcus. Some people are so selfish. There are actual humans struggling, and this guy is worried about a few pennies of electricity. This right here is why neighborhoods are falling apart. One comment stood out because it was from Diana Torres, the woman who'd called him earlier. "I tried to mediate this situation, but clearly some people are beyond reason. Karen, you've handled this with such grace. I hope your charger is fixed soon and you can move forward from this." There were 47 comments defending Karen, 12 that seemed neutral or expressed some sympathy for Marcus's side, 3 that were deleted by moderators. By the time Marcus checked the group at lunch, the post had been shared externally. People from other neighborhoods were commenting. People were tagging their local environmental groups. One woman mentioned organizing a community charging initiative and suggested that Marcus should be shamed for preventing it. The post had taken on a life of its own. He called David. His brother answered immediately, as if he'd been expecting the call. "She did another post, didn't she?" David said. "How did you know?" "Because that's how people like this operate. They test the waters, you respond, they escalate. They get validation, they escalate again. It's a feedback loop. And social media is perfect for it because it rewards escalation. The more dramatic your story is, the more engagement you get. So she has an actual incentive to keep making you look worse." "What do I do?" "Honestly, nothing. Don't respond. Don't comment. Don't post your side. You'll just feed the algorithm more content, and all your input will do is make the whole thing bigger. And she'll quote you out of context and build a new narrative around that." "So I just let her lie about me?" "In the court of public opinion. Yeah, you kind of do. That's the sad part. But legally, you're fine. And eventually, people will move on to the next drama. They always do." Marcus knew David was right. He also knew that knowing he was right wouldn't make the next week any easier. Marcus knew this because she posted about it on the neighborhood Facebook group, with a photo of the newly repaired charger and a caption that read, "Finally, thank you to the electrician who was able to fit me in earlier than expected. Happy to be environmentally responsible again and grateful for the neighbors who actually offered to help during a difficult time." The post was a final punctuation mark. It said, "I no longer need you. I was right to have standards. People who helped me were good people. You were not." But what it really said was, "I won." Marcus read the post and felt something like vertigo. By every rational metric, he'd won. He'd protected his property. He'd followed the law. He'd had the police confirm his rights. Her complaint had been deemed unfounded. She no longer needed his charger. And yet, in the story that the neighborhood had constructed, she was the sympathetic protagonist, and he was the antagonist. That evening, Marcus made a decision. He was going to move. He didn't tell anyone this immediately. He spent the weekend thinking about it, imagining the process, listing the house, finding something new, dealing with the hassle of moving. It would take months. But the alternative was staying in this place where he'd been somehow transformed, in the eyes of his community, into a villain for daring to protect his own property. On Monday, he called a realtor. Her name was Jennifer. She came to the house and walked through, talking about market conditions and price points and comparable properties. She seemed optimistic about the house. It was nice, well-maintained, in a good location. "Why the quick sale?" she asked. "Job opportunity." "Just ready for something different," Marcus said. She nodded like this was something she heard all the time, which it probably was. What neither of them mentioned was that Marcus was running away, that the house had stopped feeling like a home. that the neighborhood had stopped feeling like community and had started feeling like hostility disguised as civility. He was listing his house because one woman had decided to be unreasonable, and because the community had decided to validate her unreasonableness. The listing went live on Wednesday, and by Wednesday evening there was a new post on the Facebook group. This one was from Karen, and it was titled, "A Reflection and an Apology, Sort of." Marcus almost didn't read it, but something made him click, and then he was reading Karen's words. "I've been thinking about the situation with my neighbor, and I want to be honest about something. In the process of advocating for myself and my family, I may have escalated things more than was necessary. I'm not saying I was wrong. I still think he was being unnecessarily cruel, but I could have handled my own side of this better. And I'm noticing that he's now selling his house, and I can't help but feel like my actions may have contributed to that. I don't want to be the kind of person who makes their neighbors feel so uncomfortable that they leave. I want to live in a community where we can work things out. So I want to publicly apologize for any part I played in the escalation. Marcus, if you're reading this, I genuinely didn't mean for things to go this far." It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. Because now she'd positioned herself as the reflective one, the bigger person, the one capable of growth and self-awareness. And she'd done it in a way that subtly reinforced the narrative that Marcus had been the one being cruel by apologizing for escalating, as if both of them had escalated equally. She'd also given everyone on the Facebook group permission to forgive her while continuing to judge him. Marcus sat in his apartment, holding his phone, feeling something like despair. His phone rang. It was his brother. "Did you see the post where she apologized?" David asked. "Yeah. That's actually brilliant, you have to admit." "I don't have to admit anything. She just made herself the sympathetic character, and she did it in a way that makes you look even worse if you respond. If you accept the apology, you look like you've been vindicated, but you're still the unreasonable one for selling your house over something relatively minor. If you reject the apology, you look like a petty bastard who can't accept an olive branch." "So I just take it," Marcus said. "You ignore it, you sell your house, you move on, and you learn that you can't win against people who are willing to make a public crusade out of something. Because winning requires them to admit they were wrong, and people like Karen never do that. They just evolve their narrative." The house sold in 3 weeks. An investor bought it sight unseen for slightly below asking price. Marcus didn't care. He was moving into an apartment in a different neighborhood, a place with no history, no drama, no Karen. In his last week in the house, he noticed something. The neighborhood felt hostile in a way it hadn't before. People he'd known for years no longer waved. The couple across the street, Rebecca and Tom, who'd been friendly before, actually turned away when they saw him getting his mail. He'd become the guy who'd been mean to Karen. That was his legacy in Willow Grove. Not 7 years of being a decent neighbor. Not all the times he'd kept to himself and bothered no one. Not his respect for property and boundaries. Just the guy who locked his Charger. On his last day, he stood in the empty house and looked out the window at his driveway. The Charger was gone. He'd had it removed and donated to the city's EV infrastructure project, which felt like poetic justice. The driveway was just asphalt now. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "I hope you have a good life wherever you go. And I truly am sorry about all of this. I think we both could have handled things differently." It was Karen reaching out one last time. Marcus looked at the message for a long time. Then he deleted it without responding. As he drove away from Rosewood Drive, heading toward his new apartment, he thought about boundaries and conflicts, and the ways that being right and being understood were sometimes opposites. He'd been right, but she'd won. 6 months later, Marcus was having coffee with Daniel at a place in his new neighborhood when his phone buzzed with a notification from his old neighborhood's Facebook group. He'd kept the app on his phone. He wasn't sure why exactly. Masochism, maybe, or perhaps a part of him needed to know what was happening in the place he'd left. The post was from Robert Chen, the HOA president, and it was titled, "Update on Electrical Safety Issues in Willow Grove." Dear neighbors, I want to address some recent developments regarding complaints filed about electrical installations in our neighborhood. It has come to my attention that several complaints have been filed recently regarding electrical safety standards, including one previous complaint that was deemed unfounded after professional inspection. We have now discovered that these complaints may have been filed without factual basis as part of a dispute between neighbors. Going forward, the HOA board will be taking a more careful approach to evaluating complaints to ensure they reflect genuine safety concerns rather than personal conflicts. Additionally, we are implementing a new policy requiring that any formal complaints be accompanied by specific documentation of the alleged violation to prevent the misuse of the complaint process. Thank you for your understanding. Marcus read the post twice, then he showed it to Daniel. Someone finally realized what she was doing, Daniel said, reading it over his shoulder. That's good, that's actual accountability. It doesn't undo anything, though, Marcus said. I still sold my house. I know, but maybe it prevents her from doing it to someone else. But that wasn't quite right either, Marcus thought, because Corinne's actions hadn't really violated anything formal. She'd filed complaints that were within her rights to file, even if they were unfounded. She'd posted on Facebook, which was her right. She'd called the police, which was her right. The only thing she'd done wrong was do all of it for bad reasons. And there wasn't really a law against bad reasons. He was about to close the app when he noticed the comments. There were a lot of them. This is about the charger situation, isn't it? Corinne has been a nightmare ever since that new investor bought the Chen house. She's been posting complaints about everything. The investor's landscaping, the color of the exterior paint, the fact that they're renting to a young family with children. I've started documenting her complaints. I count at least 7 in the past 4 months. The investor actually responded. He changed the paint color back to the original, but he said if she files any more complaints, he's going to sue her for harassment. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. He kept reading. It's getting out of hand. She's not trying to hold people accountable anymore. She's just trying to cause problems. I think she's got some kind of disorder. I wouldn't diagnose her, but I agree she's escalated the situation way beyond normal. Has anyone actually talked to her about this? Like just sitting down and asking if she's okay, because this behavior isn't normal. One comment was from Corinne herself. I don't understand why people are turning on me now. I was right about the electrical safety. I was right to advocate for my family. And now I'm being made out to be the villain because I'm trying to maintain community standards. But underneath that comment, another person had responded. Maintaining community standards means following a consistent code, not selectively applying complaints based on personal feelings. You filed a safety complaint about Marcus that was unfounded. You haven't filed any complaints about the current owner despite having more legitimate grounds. That looks personal, not principled. The thread continued, with people pointing out the pattern. Corinne had complained about Marcus's charger, but not about other electrical installations in the neighborhood. She'd complained about the investor's landscaping, but overlooked worse landscaping problems on other properties. She'd called the police on Marcus, but hadn't called them on anyone else who'd had disputes with neighbors. She was, Marcus realized reading through the comments, being held accountable. Not by him, not by the legal system, but by the community, which had finally noticed that her complaints followed a pattern of personal vendetta rather than actual community concern. There was a new post from Diana Torres, the woman who'd tried to mediate initially. That was particularly damning. I want to publicly acknowledge that I was wrong to try to mediate this situation without understanding the full context. I was sympathetic to Corinne's story without fully investigating whether her claims were accurate. This has taught me to be more careful about accepting narratives without verification, especially when those narratives come from someone who benefits from a particular outcome. Essentially, Diana was admitting she'd been manipulated. Corinne had 3 responses to that comment, none of them defensive. She'd simply said, "I appreciate you saying that," as if she didn't actually understand that Diana was calling her out. Marcus closed the app and set his phone down. "You okay?" Daniel asked. "I think she's being turned into the neighborhood pariah," Marcus said. "I think she's becoming what she was always going to become," Daniel said. "Someone who loses credibility because they use it inconsistently. The thing is, she was never going to lose that credibility to you. But she could lose it to a bunch of people watching the pattern, and apparently that's what's happening." 2 weeks later, Marcus got a message on his personal email. No subject line, just from Corinne's email address. "Marcus, I'm writing this because I don't know how else to reach you. You had me blocked, which I understand. I need to apologize. Not for what I said publicly, but for what I was actually doing, which I think you understood even if the neighborhood didn't. I was wrong. I was wrong about the charger being public property. I was wrong to file the safety complaint. I was wrong to go to the police. I was wrong to use the Facebook group to build a case against you. I knew all of those things were wrong when I did them, and I did them anyway, and I told myself I was doing them for valid reasons. The truth is, I was hurt. A year before all of this, my husband left me. He left me with 4 kids and 2 car payments and a mortgage that I struggled with every month. When you told me I couldn't use your charger, I felt like the universe was telling me that I wasn't allowed to ask for help. Like I was supposed to handle everything alone, the way I'd been trying to do. That's not your fault. That's my fault for making it your problem. I'm getting help now. Therapy, medication, the works. And from the outside perspective that help has given me, I can see that what I did to you was cruel and that I did it deliberately, even if I didn't want to admit that at the time. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't think you should. But I wanted to tell you that I'm sorry and that I understand if you think I'm a terrible person. I'm coming to understand that myself. Karen. Marcus read the email several times. He was skeptical of it. He was wondering if it was real. He was wondering if she was still manipulating, just in a different way now, going for forgiveness instead of validation. But he was also seeing in the words something that seemed genuine. The admission of the husband leaving. The acknowledgement that she'd known what she was doing was wrong and done it anyway. The admission that she was getting help. He sat with the email for 3 days before responding. Karen, thank you for writing this. I'm not sure I believe it entirely, and I think it's possible that you're partially writing this because you've faced consequences from the community and you're looking for some kind of redemption. But I also think that people are complicated, and that you probably believe what you're writing while also being partially motivated by the consequences you've faced. I accept your apology, not because I think it erases what happened, but because I think both of us handled that situation poorly, even if we handled it poorly in different ways. I set a boundary firmly, but without much empathy for your situation. You violated that boundary and then escalated in ways that were designed to punish me for not being accommodating. I hope the therapy helps. I hope things get better for you and your kids, and I hope that in the future you ask for help in ways that don't involve making someone else look like the villain. Marcus. Over the next few months, Marcus noticed that the neighborhood Facebook group posts about Karen became less frequent. There were no more complaints filed in the HOA. The investor who'd bought Marcus's house seemed to be living in relative peace. Karen's life, from what little Marcus could observe from a distance, had stabilized. And Marcus's life had moved forward. His new apartment was in a walkable neighborhood where people were less inclined to performative community drama. He'd made some new friends. He'd stopped checking the neighborhood Facebook group so obsessively. But something had shifted in him as a result of the situation. He'd learned that being right wasn't the same as winning. He'd learned that communities could turn against you based on narratives rather than facts. He'd learned that one person's drama could be amplified by social media until it dominated an entire neighborhood's reality. Most importantly, he'd learned that setting a boundary, even a perfectly reasonable one, could be used against him by someone willing to weaponize the community's desire to feel morally superior. 9 months after the initial incident, Marcus got a notification that his old house had been sold again. The investor had held it for 8 months and then flipped it. The new owner was a teacher in her 30s, moving to the area for a job. He wondered if she knew about Karen, if she'd been warned, if she'd understand the history of that driveway and that charger. He wondered if she'd encounter Karen and have her own conflict, or if Karen had really changed, really gotten help, really understood what she'd done. He guessed he'd probably never know. 11 months after leaving Willow Grove, Marcus was at a supermarket in his new neighborhood when he saw her. Not Karen, the new owner of the house. She was in the produce section, selecting avocados, and she was alone. She looked stressed, the kind of stress that comes from too many decisions and too little sleep. Marcus recognized that look because he'd worn it for a significant portion of the Karen situation. He was going to leave it there, walk past, mind his own business. He'd learned that lesson. But something made him pause. He approached her carefully, the the way you'd approach a stray animal you weren't sure about. I'm sorry, this is weird, but did you just move to Willow Grove subdivision, to the house on Rosewood Drive? She looked up confused and slightly wary. Yes, how did you? I used to own that house, Marcus said. I sold it about a year ago. I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Her expression changed immediately. Oh no, is something wrong with the house? The house is fine, it's the neighborhood. Well, specifically one neighbor. Can I buy you a coffee? They went to the coffee shop next to the supermarket. Her name was Lily Chen, no relation to Marcus. She was a second-grade teacher who just moved to the area to be closer to her aging parents. She'd bought the house because it was affordable and in a decent school district. Marcus told her about Karen, not to poison her against the woman, but to prepare her. He explained the property rights issue, the escalation, the Facebook group drama, the cease and desist letter, the move. Lily listened carefully. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. So, she said, you're telling me that all of this happened because you wouldn't let her use your charger? Yes. That's insane. I know. But you're also telling me that she's in therapy now, that she wrote you an apology. That's what she says in her email. I believe her partially. Lily set down her coffee cup and leaned back in her chair. I appreciate you telling me this. I'm going to set really clear boundaries with that woman if she tries something like that with me. But I also want to make sure I'm not treating her like a villain before she's done anything wrong to me. That's a good approach, Marcus said. Just document everything if she does escalate. Emails, text messages, screenshots, and don't assume that other people will support you just because you're right. Why would they not support me? Because narratives are powerful, and Karen is good at creating them. Marcus didn't expect to hear from Lily again, but 3 weeks later she texted him, "Can we talk?" They met at the same coffee shop. Lily looked exhausted. Karen came to my house, Lily said. On my second day living there, she brought cookies. She was incredibly friendly. She told me about the previous owner, you, and how difficult he'd been. She said everyone had tried to help him integrate into the community, but he was hostile and selfish. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. And what did you say? Nothing. I thanked her for the cookies and didn't commit to anything. But I'm confused now because your story was so different from hers. She made you sound like a hermit who hated neighbors. You made you sound like someone who just wanted boundaries. I think we're both right, Marcus said carefully. I wanted boundaries. I probably came across as hostile when I enforced them. I didn't go out of my way to be social. But I also didn't do anything wrong. Karen's version of events is more compassionate seeming on the surface, but it's built on a lie that I'd violated some kind of community obligation. How do I know which version is true? You don't, not yet, but watch how she behaves. If she respects your boundaries, great. If she doesn't, if she escalates, if she goes to other neighbors and builds a case against you, then you'll know. Lily nodded. I'm going to assume good faith with her initially, but I'm also going to protect myself. Is that fair? That's the perfect approach, Marcus said. Over the next 3 months, Lily updated Marcus occasionally. Karen had been friendly but persistent. She'd shown up unannounced a few times with flowers or baked goods. She'd mentioned, casually, that the HOA president was strict and that Lily should make sure to follow all the rules or she'd get in trouble. She'd suggested that people in the neighborhood were judgmental and that Lily should be careful about which neighbors she made friends with. It was subtler than what she'd done with Marcus, but it was the same fundamental manipulation, creating a sense of threat and positioning herself as the guide. Has she asked for anything? Marcus asked during one of their coffee meetings. Not yet, Lily said, but I have a feeling she will. She was right. 2 weeks later, Lily texted. She asked if she could park her second car in my driveway while she gets her fence fixed. Said it would only be for a few days. Marcus called her immediately. Don't let her. Why not? It's just a driveway. Because once you let her do one thing, you're inside her system. You've established a pattern of accommodation. And then when you say no to something else, you're being inconsistent. You become the bad guy. But if I say no now, you set a precedent that you don't do favors for her. It's actually fine. Just say you're not comfortable with it. Lily did. Karen responded with hurt silence, which was more effective than anger. She stopped showing up with baked goods. She stopped waving when Lily got her mail. She made a point of being coldly polite when they encountered each other. Is this how it started with you? Lily asked. Not exactly, but the pattern is similar. She's testing your boundaries to see how firm they actually are. By month 4, the neighborhood Facebook group had become eerily quiet. There were no new posts about Karen, but there were also fewer posts in general. It was as if the drama had fundamentally changed the group's dynamic. People were more careful, less inclined to share, less trusting of each other. Marcus noticed this because Lily sent him screenshots of interactions that had turned cold. Neighbors who'd been friendly were now more distant. The casual community feeling had been replaced with a kind of careful politeness. This is what happens when one person's conflict becomes the neighborhood's narrative, Marcus said. But nothing has even happened yet, Lily said. Karen hasn't done anything major to me. She's just been persistent and a little cold. Exactly. The damage is done just by the existence of tension. People start choosing sides before they even know there are sides to choose. And then, unexpectedly, everything shifted. Marcus got a call from a number he didn't recognize. It was Officer Martinez, the same police officer who'd come to his house about the cease and desist letter. Marcus Chen, she said. This is Officer Martinez from the police department. I'm calling because Karen Mitchell filed a police report against you. Marcus's stomach dropped. Against me? What? I don't even live there anymore. She's claiming that you've been putting your new neighbor up to harassing her. She says that the new owner of your house is following her instructions and that you're orchestrating a campaign against her. There was silence on the line. That's completely false, Marcus said quietly. I gave the new owner a heads up about Karen's behavior, but I didn't tell her to do anything, and I'm not orchestrating anything. I know, Martinez said, and she sounded tired. I also know that Karen filed a complaint about your charger that was unfounded. I also know that she's called the police multiple times about the new neighbor doing completely normal things. And I know that she's posted on Facebook several times claiming that the new neighbor is harassing her, when in reality the new neighbor has just not let Karen use her driveway. So there's no basis for the claim against me. No basis at all. But I wanted to call and give you the same courtesy I should have given you before, a heads up that someone is making accusations against you, even though those accusations have no merit. I wanted you to know that this is being documented, and I wanted to suggest that if you ever need it, you should probably screenshot this conversation, just in case she escalates further. After she hung up, Marcus sat for a long time, staring at his phone. Karen had gone to the police, told them that Marcus was orchestrating his new neighbor against her, and created a false record of harassment. It was, he realized, exactly what she'd done to him. Use the formal systems, create official documentation, build a case that sounded plausible in its outlines even if the details were lies. He called Lily immediately. Karen filed a police report against me, he told her. What? Why? Because I warned you about her and you set boundaries with her. She's decided that I'm orchestrating you, which somehow proves that I'm the one harassing her. Lily was quiet. Then, what do? We document everything. Every interaction with her, every post she makes about us online, every call she makes, every email, we build our own record. Of what? Of a pattern, of consistent behavior that shows she's the one pursuing the conflict, not us. 3 months later, the situation had reached a kind of strange equilibrium. Karen had not made any major moves against either Marcus or Lily, but she'd also not backed off entirely. She posted occasionally on the neighborhood Facebook group, always positioning herself as someone trying to maintain standards while being attacked. She called the police once when Lily had a birthday party because she claimed the noise was excessive. It wasn't. She left comments on various neighborhood social media posts that always contained some implication of wrongdoing by either Marcus or Lily. But crucially, people had started to notice the pattern. Robert Chen, the HOA president, had written Marcus a letter apologizing for not taking the situation more seriously the first time. Diana Torres had privately apologized to Lily for her role in amplifying the initial conflict. Several of the neighbors who'd originally supported Karen had quietly moved away from her, sensing that the narrative she'd built was unstable. The neighborhood had become a place of careful, quiet judgment of Karen, rather than judgment of Marcus. One evening, Marcus got an email from an address he didn't recognize. When he opened it, he realized it was from a lawyer representing Karen. Dear Mr. Chen, my client, Karen Mitchell, is requesting that you cease and desist from the following activities. 1. Communicating with her neighbors about her personal history. 2. Encouraging other neighbors to avoid her. 3. Posting or causing to be posted false information about her on social media. And 4. Coordinating with other residents in a campaign of deliberate social exclusion. Any continued engagement in these activities will result in legal action for tortious interference and harassment. Marcus read the letter 3 times, then he forwarded it to Patricia, his lawyer. Patricia called him immediately. "This is actually remarkable," she said. "She's doing exactly what she did to you. She's trying to use legal threats to silence you." "What do I do?" "First, you respond that you've done none of those things. Second, you document that this letter exists. Third, you don't change your behavior because of it." "But what if she actually sues?" "She probably won't. But if she does, we'll have a clear record of her using legal threats to intimidate you into silence. That's its own form of harassment." Karen did not sue. Instead, the situation slowly transformed into something different. The neighborhood didn't reject Karen outright. That would have been too dramatic, too collective. Instead, people just gradually associated with her less. When she was at HOA meetings, conversations would shift. When she posted on Facebook, fewer people would engage. When she was at the community pool, other parents would be polite but distant. It wasn't orchestrated. It was just what happened when someone had revealed themselves to be using community systems for personal vendettas. 6 months after Officer Martinez's call, Marcus ran into Karen at a grocery store. Not his usual one, but one in a neighboring area. She was in the frozen foods section, and they made eye contact across the aisle. Marcus was about to turn away when Karen approached him. She looked different, smaller somehow, less certain. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi," Marcus replied carefully. I got a cease and desist letter from a lawyer," she said. "But I told him not to actually send it. I was angry and I wanted to scare you the way I felt scared. But that's not actually what I want." Marcus didn't say anything. "I know you hate me," Karen continued. "I know the neighborhood hates me and I deserve it. I handled that whole situation wrong in every way. I filed false complaints. I lied to the community. I tried to destroy your reputation because you wouldn't let me use your charger." She laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "When I say it out loud like that, I sound insane." "You don't sound insane," Marcus said. "You sound like someone who was struggling and made bad choices because of it." "That doesn't excuse what I did." "No," Marcus agreed. "It doesn't, but it explains it." They stood in silence in the frozen foods aisle, surrounded by boxes of vegetables and breakfast burritos and the hum of the refrigeration units. "My kids know," Karen said finally, "that people don't like me, that I'm the mean mom on the street. My oldest asked me last week if I was a bad person, and I couldn't even deny it convincingly." Marcus felt something complicated in his chest. Pity, maybe, but also still anger, still resentment. Still the knowledge that her consequences didn't undo what she'd done to him. "I'm glad you see it," Marcus said. "I'm glad you understand what you did, but I also think you need to understand that my understanding won't fix what you broke. The neighborhood's trust in you is damaged. The community has fractures that aren't going to heal just because you've had some self-reflection." Karen nodded. "I know. And I don't think I can forgive you, even if you mean the apology. I can accept it. I can acknowledge that you're trying to change, but I can't forgive what you did to me and to this community." "I know," Karen said again, and this time she sounded like she actually did. She turned and walked away, and Marcus stood in the frozen foods aisle, holding a box of frozen peas that he didn't remember picking up. 1 year after the encounter in the grocery store, Marcus received an invitation. It was to a community event, a neighborhood restoration dinner. Robert Chen, the HOA president, was hosting a gathering for Willow Grove residents specifically to rebuild community connections after what Robert called in the invitation, a period of difficult interpersonal dynamics. Marcus didn't want to go. He had no desire to return to Willow Grove, no interest in community restoration, no motivation to participate in reconciliation theater. But Lily called him and asked him to come, and he found himself saying yes. The event was held on a Saturday evening in the community center. There were about 40 people there, not a huge turnout, but significant enough to show that people cared about rebuilding what had been fractured. Karen was there. She stood somewhat apart from the group and people did not gravitate toward her, but no one was actively cruel to her either. She was just tolerated, acknowledged with nods but not engaged in deep conversation. Marcus noticed that Karen's kids were with her, 3 of the 4. The oldest one, the child who'd been born since the conflict, was nowhere to be seen. Marcus wondered if he'd refused to come or if Karen had decided to leave him home. Robert made a speech about community, about understanding differences, about moving forward together. He didn't mention Karen or Marcus specifically, but he did say, "We learned that sometimes our conflicts are more about ourselves than about the actual disagreement. And when we can see that, we have the chance to heal." It was diplomatic. It was vague. It probably meant everything and nothing depending on your perspective. After the event, Marcus was standing in the parking lot with Lily when Karen approached them. "Thank you for coming," she said to Marcus. "I know you didn't have to." "You're welcome," Marcus said, and he meant it in the way you mean things when you're being polite but not warm. "I'm moving," Karen said abruptly. Marcus and Lily exchanged glances. "My husband's company is relocating him to Seattle. He wants to try again and I think it might be good for all of us. A fresh start. Somewhere I'm not the woman who destroyed her own reputation." "When?" Lily asked. "End of next month." After she walked away, Marcus said to Lily, "How do you feel about that?" "Relief," Lily said, "but also sadness. I don't know, it's sad that she couldn't just stay and be a regular neighbor, that everything had to blow up." "It's sad for her," Marcus said, "but it's probably good for everyone else." Karen left Willow Grove in early December. The house went on the market immediately, and within 2 weeks it was sold to a young family with 2 kids and a dog. They seemed normal, average. They probably had no idea about the drama that had unfolded in that house. The neighborhood moved on. The Facebook group returned to its normal function of lost pets and home improvement advice and local news. Robert Chen continued as HOA president. Diana Torres organized a community garden project. Lily integrated into the neighborhood as a normal resident, well-liked and uncontroversial. And Marcus had learned something, though he wasn't entirely sure what. He'd learned that being right wasn't the same as being victorious. He'd learned that communities were fragile and that one person's escalation could damage them permanently. He'd learned that people could do terrible things and still be human beings worthy of some kind of compassion, even if that compassion stopped short of forgiveness. He'd also learned that running away sometimes made sense, that boundaries were worth protecting, and that sometimes the universe really was just unjust in small ways that didn't have solutions. 2 years after the initial incident with the charger, Marcus was working from a coffee shop in his neighborhood when he saw something on his phone. A notification from a Facebook group he didn't think he was still in. A post from Karen in what looked like a Seattle neighborhood group. "Hi everyone, I'm new to the area and I want to make sure I'm being a good neighbor and community member. I had some experiences in my previous neighborhood that I'm not proud of and I want to do better here. So I'm making a commitment. I will respect my neighbor's property and their boundaries. I will assume good faith. I will try to build community in ways that don't require judgment. If you see me straying from that, please hold me accountable. I'm trying to be a better person." Marcus read the post 3 times. He didn't know if Karen was actually going to follow through on this commitment. He didn't know if she'd genuinely changed or if she was just starting fresh with a new narrative. He didn't know if her new neighbors would eventually see through her or if she'd genuinely found a way to be better. But he also found that he didn't need to know these things. Her struggle with herself was her own now. His role in her story was over. He closed the app and returned to his work, to his quiet life in his new neighborhood, to the peace that came from not being part of someone else's drama. And if he occasionally thought about the charger and about Karen, and about what might have happened if he just let her charge her phone that first time, he also remembered that some conflicts are inevitable. Some people will push, some boundaries are worth defending. And sometimes the only way to win is to step away from the game entirely.